President Trump finally rewarded Boeing for its failure in space, almost 2 months after SpaceX rescued the stranded astronauts. Hey, I'm Lucas. Welcome to the SpaceX community. Let's get started. Boeing, once the crown jewel of American aerospace, has been a household name, synonymous with innovation, ambition, and engineering prowess. From the Saturn V rockets that propelled astronauts to the moon during the Apollo program, to the space shuttle that defined an era of reusable spacecraft, Boeing was the backbone of NASA's most iconic achievements. For decades, it wasn't just a contractor. It was the gold standard, the company that turned America's space dreams into reality. But the tides have turned, and Boeing's once stellar reputation in space exploration has been eroded by a series of missteps, delays, and outright failures. The company's fall from grace is nowhere more evident than in its troubled Starliner crew capsule and its role in NASA's Space Launch System, SLS. Now, with the 2026 federal budget proposed under the Trump administration threatening to upend NASA's roadmap, Boeing's space ambitions are teetering on the edge of collapse. This isn't just a story of corporate mismanagement. It's a saga of how one of America's industrial giants was brought to its knees and how recent political decisions could deliver the final blow. So, let's start with the golden era of Boeing's space legacy. To understand the magnitude of Boeing's current predicament, we must first revisit its glory days. In the 1960s and 1970s, Boeing was a titan of aerospace engineering. As a key contractor for NASA's Apollo program, the company built the first stage of the Saturn V rocket, the behemoth that carried humans to the lunar surface. This was no small feat. The Saturn V remains one of the most powerful rockets ever built, a testament to Boeing's ability to deliver on audacious goals. When NASA transitioned to the Space Shuttle program in the 1980s, Boeing was again at the forefront, contributing to the design and construction of the orbiters that became symbols of American ingenuity. For decades, Boeing's name was synonymous with reliability, precision, and success in space. The company's contributions weren't limited to NASA. Boeing's commercial aviation division produced iconic aircraft like the 747, while its defense and space divisions secured lucrative contracts for military satellites and other high-tech systems. By the early 2000s, Boeing was a juggernaut, a company that seemed untouchable. Its deep ties to NASA and the US government ensured a steady stream of funding, and its reputation as a trusted partner made it the default choice for major aerospace projects. But beneath this veneer of success, cracks were beginning to form. A series of strategic missteps, cultural shifts within the company, and fierce competition from a new generation of aerospace players would soon expose Boeing's vulnerabilities. Now, coming onto the Starliner debacle, a case study in failure. No project encapsulates Boeing's fall from grace more than the Starliner crew capsule, a spacecraft intended to ferry astronauts to the International Space Station, ISS, under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Launched in 2014, the program aimed to restore America's ability to launch astronauts from US soil after the Space Shuttle's retirement in 2011. NASA awarded Boeing a $4.2 billion fixed-price contract to develop Starliner, while SpaceX received $2.6 billion for its Crew Dragon capsule. The difference in funding reflected NASA's confidence in Boeing's experience and track record, while SpaceX was seen as a riskier bet, a scrappy startup led by the unpredictable Elon Musk. The goal was simple: build a safe, reliable spacecraft to shuttle astronauts to the ISS and back. Boeing, with its decades of experience, was expected to deliver effortlessly. SpaceX, meanwhile, was the underdog, a company with no prior crewed spaceflight experience. But the reality unfolded in stark contrast to expectations. SpaceX's Crew Dragon made its first crewed flight in 2020, successfully docking with the ISS and establishing a track record of reliability. By 2025, Crew Dragon had flown multiple NASA missions and even private astronaut trips, becoming the workhorse of American crewed spaceflight. Starliner, on the other hand, remains mired in development, unable to achieve certification for operational missions. The problems with Starliner began almost immediately. In 2019, its first uncrewed test flight, Orbital Flight Test 1, OFT-1, was a disaster. Software glitches caused the spacecraft to miss its intended orbit, preventing it from docking with the ISS. NASA and Boeing downplayed the failure, promising a quick fix, but the issues were deeper than a few lines of code. Investigations revealed systemic problems in Boeing's development process, including inadequate testing, poor communication between teams, and a lack of oversight. The company was forced to conduct a second uncrewed test, OFT-2, in 2022, which was only marginally more successful. While Starliner reached the ISS, new issues emerged, including propulsion system malfunctions and parachute concerns. By 2024, Boeing attempted its first crewed test flight, carrying 2 NASA astronauts to the ISS. But the mission, intended as a final step towards certification, became a public relations nightmare. I'd like to quickly remind you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We regularly upload informative SpaceX and space news videos that you won't want to miss. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you're notified whenever we release new content. Thruster failures and helium leaks stranded the astronauts on the ISS for months, forcing NASA to rely on SpaceX to bring them home. The Starliner capsule returned to Earth uncrewed, leaving Boeing to face scathing criticism. The company's engineers scrambled to address the issues, but each delay added to the program's already staggering cost overruns. Boeing has spent an estimated $2 billion of its own money on top of NASA's $4.2 billion contract, bringing the total cost to $6.2 billion. And Starliner still isn't operational. The fixed-price nature of the contract has been a double-edged sword. Unlike cost-plus contracts, which allow contractors to bill NASA for overruns, fixed-price agreements require companies to absorb additional costs if they miss milestones. For Boeing, this meant footing the bill for redesigns, additional testing, and staffing changes. The company's leadership has admitted that Starliner's delays have strained its finances, with some analysts estimating that the program could cost Boeing billions more if it fails to achieve certification before the ISS is retired in 2030. Now, coming on to the Space Launch System. A costly albatross. While Starliner has been Boeing's most visible failure, its role in NASA's Space Launch System, SLS, has been equally problematic. Announced in 2011, SLS was envisioned as the cornerstone of NASA's Artemis program, a heavy-lift rocket capable of carrying humans beyond low Earth orbit for the first time since Apollo. Boeing was tasked with developing the rocket's massive core stage and its exploration upper stage, EUS, critical components that would determine the program's success. NASA initially projected a development cost of $18 billion, with the first launch slated for 2017. But like Starliner, SLS quickly became a case study in mismanagement. By the time SLS finally launched Artemis I in 2022, the program's cost had ballooned to $23.8 billion, $5.8 billion over budget. The exploration upper stage, originally estimated at $1 billion, is now projected to cost $2.8 billion by 2028, nearly triple the initial estimate. These overruns occurred despite strong, bipartisan support in Congress, which viewed SLS as a jobs engine for states like Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida. Year after year, lawmakers poured billions into the program, ensuring its funding remained untouchable. Yet Boeing's execution fell short. Delays in manufacturing, testing, and integration plagued the core stage, while the EUS faced its own setbacks, including design changes and supply chain issues. To put Boeing's struggles in perspective, consider SpaceX's achievements during the same period. While Boeing labored to get SLS off the ground, SpaceX developed the Falcon 9 rocket for $440 million and the Falcon Heavy for $500 million. Both rockets are now operational, with Falcon 9 having flown over 300 missions and Falcon Heavy rivaling SLS in payload capacity. SLS, by contrast, is fully expendable, costs $2 billion per launch, and is expected to fly only a handful of times before being phased out. SpaceX's Starship, a fully reusable rocket with a development cost estimated at $5 to $10 billion, promises to carry 100 metric tons to orbit, far surpassing SLS's capabilities at a fraction of the cost. Boeing's inability to deliver SLS on time and within budget has drawn scrutiny from NASA's oversight bodies. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, has repeatedly criticized the program's management, pointing to Boeing's failure to meet milestones and its reliance on outdated manufacturing processes. The company's insistence on traditional aerospace practices, which prioritize meticulous documentation over rapid iteration, has clashed with the fast-paced innovation of competitors like SpaceX. As a result, SLS has become a symbol of inefficiency, a rocket that costs too much, flies too rarely, and faces an uncertain future. So, Trump's 2026 budget, the final nail in the coffin. The most significant threat to Boeing's space programs may not come from its own failures, but from external forces. Specifically, the 2026 federal budget proposed under the Trump administration. In a move that has sent shockwaves through the aerospace community, the budget calls for a 24% cut to NASA's funding, reducing its allocation from $24.8 billion to $18.8 billion. This $6 billion reduction could reshape NASA's priorities, forcing the agency to make tough decisions about which programs to keep and which to cancel. For Boeing, the timing couldn't be worse. The budget cuts come at a critical juncture for Starliner. With the ISS scheduled to retire in 2030, NASA has announced plans to reduce crewed flights to the station, limiting them to 3 missions every 2 years, with extended durations of 6 to 8 months. This drastically shrinks the window for Starliner to achieve certification and secure operational contracts. If Boeing cannot certify the spacecraft soon, it risks missing out on ISS missions entirely, rendering the $6.2 billion investment a near-total loss. The budget cuts also raise questions about NASA's willingness to continue funding a program that has yet to deliver, especially when SpaceX's Crew Dragon is already meeting the agency's needs. SLS faces an even bleaker outlook. Despite consuming nearly $24 billion in development funding, the rocket is now at risk of early retirement. The proposed budget suggests canceling SLS after just 3 Artemis missions, a move that would effectively end Boeing's role in NASA's deep space exploration plans. At $4 billion per launch, SLS is simply too expensive to sustain, especially when SpaceX's Starship offers comparable or superior capabilities at a fraction of the cost. The budget's emphasis on cost efficiency and commercial partnerships aligns with Trump's broader push for fiscal conservatism, putting pressure on NASA to prioritize programs that deliver results without breaking the bank. Before we move on to the next chapter, I have a question for all of you. What are your thoughts on Boeing's aerospace division? Do you think it still has a chance to bounce back? Or should Boeing shut down its space sector and focus only on making planes? Share your thoughts in the comments. So, why Boeing? fell behind. Boeing's struggles with Starliner and SLS are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of decline. Several factors have contributed to the company's fall from grace. First, a shift in corporate culture has prioritized shareholder value over engineering excellence. In the 1990s and 2000s, Boeing's merger with McDonnell Douglas and subsequent leadership changes led to a focus on cost-cutting and short-term profits. This eroded the company's ability to innovate and manage complex projects effectively. Second, Boeing has been outmaneuvered by competitors like SpaceX, which embrace rapid iteration and risk-taking. While SpaceX tests prototypes in real-world conditions, Boeing adheres to traditional aerospace processes that emphasize paperwork and caution. This approach, while reliable in the past, has proven ill-suited to the fast-paced demands of modern spaceflight. Third, Boeing's reliance on government contracts has made it complacent. For decades, the company benefited from cost-plus contracts that shielded it from financial risk. The shift to fixed-price contracts under the Commercial Crew program exposed Boeing's inefficiencies, forcing it to absorb billions in losses when projects like Starliner went over budget. Finally, Boeing has struggled to attract and retain top talent. The company's bureaucratic structure and slow decision-making have driven engineers and innovators to competitors like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other startups. As a result, Boeing's space division has been plagued by staffing shortages and management turnover, further hampering its ability to deliver. Now, let's discuss the ripple effects of Boeing's failures. Boeing's troubles extend beyond its own bottom line. The company's failures have strained NASA's credibility and jeopardized America's space ambitions. The Artemis program, which relies heavily on SLS, has been delayed repeatedly, pushing back plans for a human return to the moon. Starliner's setbacks have left NASA dependent on SpaceX for ISS access, raising concerns about redundancy and resilience in the agency's crewed spaceflight program. For Boeing, the financial stakes are enormous. The company has already lost billions on Starliner and SLS, and further losses could jeopardize its broader aerospace portfolio. A failure to certify Starliner before the ISS retires could lead to a write-off of the entire program, while the cancellation of SLS would eliminate a major revenue stream. These setbacks could also damage Boeing's reputation with investors and customers, making it harder to secure future contracts. So, what's next for Boeing and NASA? As Boeing grapples with its space challenges, the Trump administration's budget cuts loom large. For NASA, the reduced funding will force a re-evaluation of priorities, with a likely shift toward commercial partnerships and cost-effective solutions. SpaceX's Starship, if successful, could render SLS obsolete, while Crew Dragon's reliability makes Starliner increasingly redundant. Boeing will need to act swiftly to salvage its space programs, but the odds are stacked against it. For Starliner, the path forward is uncertain. Boeing must address the spacecraft's technical issues and achieve certification before the ISS is retired. Even then, the limited number of ISS missions may not justify the program's cost. For SLS, the future looks even grimmer. With only 3 Artemis missions planned, Boeing's role in deep space exploration could end abruptly, leaving the company to focus on its struggling commercial aviation division. Thanks for watching today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for another great video tomorrow.